It's the end of the month, and it's time for my end of the month list of the best metal albums of October. I'm sticking with the Halloween theme in my intro. All these albums were released in October. I have done full reviews for most of them, but I also have a few surprises that I discovered that I did not have time to do full reviews for. I have 14 albums to talk about. I'm not going to spend too much time on these albums because I have reviewed most of them. So with that being said, let me get right into this. At number 14 is Doro Conqueress, Forever Strong and Proud. She is a legend in heavy metal and probably the first well-known female singer in the heavy metal genre. She's been going strong for years. I don't think she's ever slowed down. I thought this was good. It wasn't awesome, but it was good enough to make the countdown. There were a lot of standout songs, including 2 covers with Rob Halford. However, I did have a minor complaint about it being a little long. Still, it's still some good classic old school heavy metal if that's your thing. Number 13 is Testimony of the Apocalypse, The Offering. This is a Christian metal band, but they play heavy thrash and groove metal. There are 2 people in the band. They're from Philly, and they're a new band. They formed in 2021. This is their second full-length album. If you're somebody who likes Christian metal, this is pretty good because, as you probably know, most Christian bands are metalcore bands. But this one is old school thrash metal, maybe leaning towards death metal and groove. It's this type of music that could be played in a Christian church. If they played metal music, I think there are actually a few of those that exist. If you read the lyrics, they can be considered like worship music. So, for example, the opening track starts off with these heavy guitar riffs, these like deep, like guttural vocals, but then they go into like the verse and it has clean singing, and they sing these lines like, Jesus, cover us, Holy Spirit, descend on us. We will rise and praise your name. I'm not sure if those are the exact lyrics, but you get the idea. And number 12 is Display of Decay with Vitriol. This is some brutal death metal from Canada. They're from Edmonton, Alberta. They've been around since 2007. They have 4 full-length albums. The album has 8 tracks with a runtime of 29 minutes. This album is the perfect length. It's straight and to the point. It's just some old school death metal. If you like bands like Cannibal Corpse or any other similar bands, I think you can get into this. It's pretty straightforward. They're not experimenting with their sound. They just have a straightforward death metal sound. It's all fast. It's all heavy. The vocals are very deep and dark and guttural, and there's a lot of speed and aggression going on in these songs. And I think that's the reason why I recommend this band. They deserve a little bit more exposure, so I think you should check them out. And number 11 is Sadistic Force with Midnight Assassin. This is a great album. It's blackened thrash metal. It can be compared to that album by Hellripper that was released early this year. I think this one is about just as good. It's thrash metal, but with those black metal vocals. A lot of songs are catchy. You hear that big like Motorhead influence in a lot of these songs, and I enjoyed this album. I did a full review. It's one of those bands that probably doesn't get a lot of attention, so I think they should get some more exposure, and I think you should check it out. And number 10 is War Curse with Confession. This band has been around for about 10 years. They're from Ohio. They play a mix of heavy metal and thrash. You can even call them like melodic thrash. Confession is their 3rd full-length album. I thought they sounded like a lot of those 90s thrash metal bands. For example, like Forbidden. I heard some similarities with like the most recent album by Evil. For those of you who remember, the last Evil album this year had this Black Album influence. So in my opinion, this album, Confession, also has some of that like black metal into it. Or Black Album, not black metal. They go heavier than the Evil album, maybe heavier than Metallica as well, but I like it. It's still heavy. It's not all fast and furious thrash. They know when to use clean guitars and atmospheric sounds, and I think that really helps the song stand out. Number 9 is Lynch Mob with Babylon. It's a band I used to listen to in the early 90s, formed by George Lynch after he left Dokken. The band has had many lineup changes over the years. I've heard a lot of people compare this one to their second self-titled album. I've not listened to this band in many years, but they sounded a lot like I remember. This album has a sound that brings back that bluesy glam metal sounds of the late 80s, early 90s. I would compare them to some of those like LA bands of that time period. Maybe something like Guns N' Roses, LA Guns, Motley Crue. On this album, they brought in some Middle Eastern influences on some of the songs. George Lynch is still great. He shreds on the guitar. The new vocalist really fits in the band well, and I thought it was very good. And number 8 is Go Ahead and Die with Unhealthy Mechanisms. This is one of those bands I like to call being part of the Cavalera family tree. This one is Max Cavalera and his son Igor Amadeus. This is just some extreme metal music. It's their second album. The first album was more leaning towards hardcore punk, but this one has a lot of different subgenres mixed into it. This album is heavier, it's faster, it's more aggressive. You can hear the vocals by both Max and Igor. Sometimes it's hard to tell who is doing the vocals, but they're all good. The lyrics are very political, as they were on the previous album. I recommend this album if you are a fan of any of the other like Cavalera bands, and it's just really good. At number 7, I have Autopsy with Ashes, Organs, Blood, and Crypts. This is an old school death metal band. They formed in 1987, back when Chris Reifert left Death, and he formed Autopsy. They have a very sick, vile, and disgusting sound, just like some of their peers like Obituary and Cannibal Corpse. I think the thing that makes this band stand out is they're not afraid to go slow at times. Most of the songs have changing tempos that go from very fast to very slow, and I think that's what sets them apart from the others. This album comes only a year after their album Morbidly Triumphant. I reviewed Morbidly Triumphant last year. I was going to do a full review of this one, but I really didn't have time. But it's still worthy of making this list. I wanted to mention it. It's solid. They're not doing anything new, so you know what you expect from this band, but that's okay because they always deliver. At number 6, I have Ciruth, Ungol with Dark Parade. This is a classic heavy metal band. They've been around almost as long as Black Sabbath. They released a few albums in the 80s, and then they released a comeback album a few years ago. This is the follow-up to that, and possibly their last album. They play classic heavy metal with some doom metal, but it's not the super slow-moving doom of those modern bands. They have a sound similar to bands like Black Sabbath, Trouble, Saint Vitus, those ones that were from the 70s and 80s. Some songs are closer to traditional heavy metal, like the opening track Velocity SEP, and others are slower and doomier, such as Sailor on the Seas of Fate, which is an 8-minute epic, and there's also a classic doom metal song called Looking Glass. I've heard people say they don't like the vocals, but they're on the higher end. But if you like the vocals and you like this band, you'll like this. So it's a really good album. I recommend it. And number 5 is October Tide, The Cancer Pledge. So this is a band I discovered just by like seeing their name and just listening to it. I thought it looked interesting. They're listed as Death Doom. I felt they were closer to melodic death metal, reminiscent of bands like Insomnium. They consist of ex-members of Catatonia. There's a little bit of that like progressive metal, like the Catatonia. There's Opeth influence. There's some atmospheric black metal, and there's, you know, you hear some of that like from those other bands like Enslaved, like those black metal bands. So I enjoyed this a lot. The guitar riffs sound very good. The songs can be complex. It can be melodic. They can be dark, and overall, I enjoyed this album a lot. In the streets with flags of me. And number 4 is Lancaster with Hell Campaign. This is my dark horse album for the month because I found them just by chance. Usually what I like to do every week is I look at the different sites that list new metal releases. So one of them is the Metal Archives website. That's the one like pretty much like everybody uses. I scan the new releases every Friday and I look for the ones with the subgenres that I like the most. So this was listed as heavy metal, so it caught my attention. And I listened to it and I thought it was just great. I've been playing it ever since. They're a new band. They formed in 2017. They're a Canadian band from Quebec. This is their second full-length album. They're listed as a heavy metal. I would say they're more of a maybe thrash or thrash / heavy metal. The vocals remind me a lot of Dave Mustaine from Megadeth. The guitar riffs are very catchy. The songs are just really super catchy. They stick in your head. And this is just one of those albums I've kept going back to on a regular basis, like throughout the month of October. I really like this one. So that's my my dark horse album of the month. Number 3 is Prong with State of Emergency. So this is a band that was one of my favorite bands in the early 90s. I used to love their albums, especially Beg to Differ, but I kind of forgotten about them towards the late 90s. Now, I saw they released another album, and they're just as good as I remember them. This album is solid. Some songs are a little heavier than I remember, but other songs sound like just like I remember, like they could have been right off their like early 90s albums. So this is arguably the first groove metal band. They also incorporate a New York hardcore into their sound, and it's just awesome. I'm glad they're still making good music. Number 2 is Theocracy with Mosaic. This is a band I've been listening to for the past few years. They play a mix of power metal and progressive metal, or epic or progressive power metal, if you want to call it that. So even if you're somebody who doesn't like power metal, I think you can get into this because their songs, they can get very heavy, they can get complex, they can get very progressive. So it's not just like that type of music. They're very melodic. If you like long songs, these guys do it very well. They have a really good 19-minute song called The Red Sea. This whole album is solid. They're a Christian band, like one of the best Christian bands, or one of my favorites from that genre. They're very unique. I can't say there are other bands that sound like them, and I've heard a lot of people say good things about this album, so definitely check it out. And number 1 is The Lion's Daughter with Bathhouse. I discovered this band about 2 years ago. They released an album called Skin Show. I reviewed it on my channel. It was one of the first really underground and extreme metal bands I reviewed. They're truly unique, mixing elements of extreme metal with some black metal and death metal. There are lots of heavy, complex guitar riffs and blast beats, but what makes them unique is their use of the haunting keyboards that sound like the type of music you would hear during the ending credits of horror movies from the 70s and 80s. That's how I would describe them. They're very original. If you like things heavy, fast, extreme, check them out. If you're looking for something easy to listen to, it's probably not for you. But this album is awesome, and that's why I have it at number 1. That is all. Check out last month's video of the best metal albums of September 2023. Please like this video. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe. If you have not already, I do rock and metal reviews, and I do this type of thing every month. So check it out, and I'll see you in the next one.